Welcome to the first ever Slack Santa Barbara chapter event. We're thrilled to have you here. Let us introduce you to the world of Slack, a platform that's more than just messaging. It's a vibrant ecosystem that fosters collaboration, innovation, and connection seamlessly. Today, we're excited to launch the Santa Barbara chapter, a platform designed to bring together tech wizards, AI enthusiasts, and creative geniuses like you. Our objective is to create a melting pot of ideas, a platform where every day is a chance to learn, grow, and make an impact. But it's not all work. We also believe in laughter, camaraderie, and creating friendships that transcend digital boundaries. So we invite you to step into this world, join the conversation, share your thoughts, ask your questions, and let your voice be heard. Make the most of this platform, because here, we believe in the power of conversation. We believe in you. Welcome.
Hey, what's going on, Slack Community Santa Barbara? My name's Jacob, and I lead Slack Community Programs. If you're watching this video, it's probably the day of your chapter event, your first chapter event. Congratulations, led by the fantastic chapter leader for Santa Barbara, Raj, who, if you haven't met already, you'll meet very soon. This is your spot to ask questions about Slack, to network with each other, to learn how to build your first workflow, or maybe a more advanced workflow, or maybe even design your first canvas. Canvas is one of my personal favorite features of Slack. But that is this spot for you, the Santa Barbara chapter and the wider Slack community. Whether you're in the workspace, whether you're on the online forum, whether you're part of the chapter events as you are right now, and everything in between, you are welcome here. And I'm working closely with Raj to make sure that you have a very positive and valuable and impactful time being a member of this chapter and the wider community. If you need anything at all, Raj is here, your chapter leader, or myself, or really any of Slack community members. I look forward to meeting each and every one of you, whether that's in Slack, on the forum, or during an event. But thanks for being here. So happy you're here, and I guess I will see you around in the community. Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks, Jacob. So I'm Raj. I'm the Slack community leader for Santa Barbara, Ventura area, and up north also. So thank you for joining. We really appreciate you tuning in for some of these great talks that we're going to have coming up. This will be a maybe quarterly event that we do, and then some will be in person, and we'll have pizza, beer, and all that fun stuff. So we're going to have 3 different talks. The first one's going to be Federico. He's going to talk about how to build a Slack bot in 10 minutes. It's going to be like a Mario speed run where he's just going to crank through building it out. So it's going to go fast, but this is recorded, so you can always go back and look at the videos. Then we're going to have Yura. He's going to talk about semantic search for Slack and what you can do with all the cool stuff with embeddings for Slack messages. And then Sophie is going to close us out with talk about emojis, our favorite thing to use. So let's, with no further ado, let's jump into it.
Welcome everyone, glad you've joined us today. I'm Federico from Amortem, and today I'm going to show you how to build a Slack app in just 10 minutes. We will cover the basics, and then I will walk you through building an app from scratch. I promise it's going to be simple. So for anyone eager to make Slack even more powerful for your team, you're in the perfect spot. Here's the game plan for today. First, we're going to break down what Slack apps can do and why they are such a game changer. Then we will go through the essentials you will need to start crafting your own app. Then the fun part, I will try to build a Slack app in just 10 minutes. And after that, I will leave my contact information so you can submit questions or feedback. And I will also leave some additional resources you can use to build your own apps. So let's get into the world of Slack apps. What are Slack apps? They are pretty much like having an extra set of hands in your Slack workspace. With just a few lines of code, this app can automate the things we do every day, link up with other tools we use, and can be tailored exactly to what your team needs. They are all about boosting our online efficiency. And today I will show you how to put one together. To build our Slack app, we need to set up our development environment. So we will need a few things. First, you will need access to a Slack workspace. which will be the playground for a new app. You will also need a code editor. I will use VS Code, but any editor will do. We will also use ngrok, which will allow us to connect our local development server to the Slack API over the internet. And of course, we will be coding in Python, so make sure you have that installed. So let's go ahead and create our app. So from the Slack website, let's create a new app from scratch. As I said, I will call my app Jokes app, and let's select my development workspace. So here we already have our app created. Now let's give our app the necessary permissions it needs. Just let's select the basic one to be able to reply in a chat. So let's select chat write. And now let's go to our app home section so we can enable the messages tab so users can send direct messages to our app. Let's install our app in our workspace. Here it says that the app is going to be able to send messages. That's because we added that scope. All right, finally, let's start with the fun part. Let's start coding. So from terminal, I'm going to create a new folder for my project, and I will open this on VS Code. Let's start by creating our requirements file. So the requirements file is going to contain all the libraries we're going to use. So the most important one is going to be Slack Bolt. It's a nice Python library to develop Slack applications. We're also going to use python.m to use environment variables and requests to make a request to an API. So let's install these requirements. Back to the terminal, I'm going to create a virtual environment. It's like the recommended way to do this. You don't need to, but I'm using Windows, so take in mind that this command may change if you're a Mac. Create the virtual environment. We can see now that we have a VM folder where all our dependencies are going to be installed. Activate, and now let's install all the requirements. So pip install all requirements. So while this is happening, let's create our .m file for our environment variables. So we're going to use just two environment variables, a Slack bot token and a Slack signing secret. All right, thank you, Copilot. So where do we find these environment variables? The Slack bot token is going to be right on the screen after we install our app. We can copy that from there. And the sign-in secret is going to be on the basic information there. Make sure you don't commit this to your Git repo. Well, everything is installed now, so let's go ahead and create our app. Let's create an app.py file. All right, we're going to need a few imports here. Let's start importing from Slack Bolt. Let's import app. We can create this app. The app will take two parameters. The first one is going to be the token that we need to get from the environment variables. So let's go ahead and import OS. And let's also from .m import load.m. This is so we can load the environment variables from our .m file. And now we can just use here OS environment get Slack Bolt token. Thank you, Copilot again. And the sign-in secret. Perfect. Okay, let's try running the app. So if name is equal to main, we will run the app on the port 3000. So let's go back to our terminal. Let me clear this. Let's do python app.py. And there it is. Both app is running. All right, let's see what happened when we chat with our app now. Let me bring my Slack window. There it is. We have our jokes app. And if we say hi, nothing happens. That's expected because we haven't done anything yet in our code. And let's see what happens if we try to send a command, Slack jokes command. Again, it's an invalid command, so let's go ahead and create a new command. So from the Slack website, let's go to the /commands section, click on create new command, and we want a new command, let's say /shock. Here we also need a request URL, but obviously we can't use localhost here, so that's why we need ngrok. So let's open another terminal and let's run ngrok on our port 3000. And here we will get like a public URL that is pointing to our port 3000 on our localhost. Let's use this for the request URL, and we have to append /slack/events. Let's use choke as a short description. Let's save. This is going to ask us to reinstall the app because we need a new scope now. So as we see here, the app is going to be able to use /commands, allow this to reinstall the app. And there we are. So let's go back to our Slack and see if we have a choke command. Perfect, there it is. We have a choke command. If we send it, again, it's going to fail because we are not handling this from our code yet. So let's go back to our VS Code window and let's handle this command. Let's do app command /choke. And now we're going to define a handler. So let's call it choke command. This is going to take an acknowledge function, a save function, and a command. This is all handled by the Slack Vault library, so you don't have to worry about this. We have to acknowledge the event so Slack doesn't keep sending us the event. So this is the first thing we need to do. And we have a save function that we can use to reply to the user. We also get the command that has some information about the command that's being executed, but I don't know if we're going to have time to use that one. All right, let's go ahead and try our command. Let me restart the app first. This python app.py. Go back to Slack and see what happens when we send the /show command. This will reply with our text. Sure, let me think a bit. Nice. So the command is working. Let's now get a random choke from an API. So now instead of saying this, we're going to create a choke, get random choke, and let's create this function. So the get random choke will use the request library that we already installed to call an API and get the choke. So let's import request and use it here. I already have the URL for the API copied, so let's do request.get, grab the URL. So here I'm calling an API to get a choke. Now let's get the choke from the response. So let's do choke equals response.json.get choke and return choke. Now here, instead of saying this, we can say choke. And now let's try our command again. Restart the app. And let's joke. I have these weird muscle spasms in my gluteus maximus. I figured out from my doctor that everything was alright. He said, weird flex, but okay. Well, I bet you can get a better API than I. Alright, to wrap up, I will leave you my contact information. Feel free to send me an email with any question or any feedback you have. You can also scan this QR code. And here is also some additional resources. The first one is the app that we just created, is the Talks app. Then we have the Haley bot for Slack. It's the bot that we are creating at Amortem. It's open source, so feel free to check that out. And I will also leave some guides to use so you can keep developing apps. So thanks everyone.
All right. That was Fede giving us a 10-minute, just nonstop, how do you make a Slack bot? And you can ask him how many takes it took to do it within 10 minutes. It wasn't necessarily easy to get it all in there, to get that speed run done. And I actually thought that joke was pretty funny. Yeah. Okay, next up, we have Yura. He's going to talk about semantic search in Slack.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yura Lukashik, and today I'm going to talk about implementing semantic search for Slack, particularly in the context of large language models. We will explore how LLMs and retrieval augmented generation can be applied to the domain of Slack communications. Here's a list of topics we will cover: RAG, or retrieval augmented generation, embeddings, vector databases, converting Slack messages to embeddings, importance of the context in the previous process, and how to use a smart LLM to infer and answer for the user's query. Let's begin. RAG, retrieval augmented generation. It combines neural network-based generation with a retrieval mechanism, allowing it to pull in necessary related information from a large data store, enhancing the accuracy and richness of the generated content. In other words, we simply give our LLM a way to search through our knowledge base and use the extracted information to generate the better output. On the left, you can see the main benefits of the RAG approach. On the right, there is a typical pipeline. We have a query which is passed over to a retrieval system. The system fetches the related documents from a data store, and then both query and the related documents are used to construct the prompt. And this prompt, consisting of these two pieces, is passed over to an LLM, and the LLM generates a meaningful response. That's the essence of RAG. Let's now talk about embeddings. OpenAI's text embeddings measure the relatedness of text strings. We have a model that is capable of converting text strings into numeric vectors in some vector space. And if there are two strings that have a similar meaning, similar semantic, then the resulting vectors have to be close in the vector space. And this has a bunch of applications. On the left, we can see some of them, which is searching, clustering, recommendations, anomaly detections, and so on. Let's take a look at an example of working with embeddings. So here's the code. We have three texts. The first one is sensitive information leaks. The second one is here's the number of Visa card and the number. And the third one is we need to create a Jira ticket for the production issue. Just random text. And we create three embeddings for these three texts and try to compare them. We try to calculate distance between these vectors. And we use the cosine similarity function for that. So here's the output. First line contains just a vector to show what it looks like. The next line, we have the distances between query and query. It's 1 because these are two exactly equal vectors. The next line is query and card info. We have 0 period 7299. And the distance between query and Jira ticket, which is just a random text, is 0 period 7245. which is lower than the previous number, which indicates that embeddings treat query and the card info queries out, query for the sensitive information, and the card info much closer than query and Jira ticket, which is just random text that I put. Vector databases. A vector database is a specific type of database designed to efficiently store, index, and search through high-dimensional vector data. Other key features of a vector database are efficient similarity search, extremely useful in our case of embeddings, advanced indexing of vectors, and scalability for large vector sets. Some popular DBs are Pinecone, Elasticsearch, and Face from Facebook. Let's take a look at an example of using a vector database. We will use Pinecone. So we initialize the library, standard stuff, and then we use two embeddings from the previous example. We just observe them into the Pinecone database. So we use the credit card embedding and random text embedding, which is Jira ticket text. So, and then we use the third embedding, query embedding, to search in the Pinecone database and see what it returns. We also set top key to 10, which is just for it to return everything in our case, because it will return up to 10 vectors, not depending on the scores. So let's take a look at the output. So the top of the output is from the previous example, so let's ignore it. We have two vectors, and the first vector is here's the number of the Visa card, which is what we expect. It gets a higher score. If we compare these two scores, the first vector has a high score. This is because it's closer to our query vector. And that's what we expect. And that's what we had in the example of embeddings. So that's nice. Let's move on. That's just show that embeddings work. That, again, I want to emphasize that texts do not intersect. There are no similar words. This embedding just captures the meaning of the sentences. And we can see it from the results. Now, as we know about vector databases and embeddings, we can start creating our new service to constantly convert Slack messages to embeddings and putting them into our vector database. The first step in this process is to actually determine how you translate messages into embeddings, what contexts you use. Then you connect your service to a Slack API to be able to fetch the data and manipulate the data. Then you implement loading initial messages and creating embeddings for them. Then you need to implement all the subscriptions and live processing of the events. And then you might want to improve the process by implementing bulk processing. Instead of processing one event at a time, one message at a time, you collect them and then you process a bulk of messages. And the last step, when you have this system working, you need to determine key metrics for your vector database and constantly monitor that. So at this point, you need to have a knowledge base in the vector database constantly populated from Slack messages. And we can move on to the next part. When we map messages to embeddings, it's crucial to think about the context that we add to our embeddings, because the overall performance or quality of your system highly depends on the context that is captured by the embeddings. And by context, we mean different type of data. It might be profile information, it might be surrounding messages, whatever is relevant. So there are some useful techniques that will help you to build better contexts. First of all, we have threads, and threads were designed to restrict conversation boundaries. And messages in threads are most likely related and probably belong to the same conversation. So we can use that. One of the ways to use that is to create summaries, a separate embedding for summary. So you use an LLM to summarize a thread, and then you create a separate embedding for that summary and let it reference the head of the thread. So, and in your query phase, when you find this summary, you also find the thread and somehow use it. Another thing that is useful is adjacent messages. Adjacent messages are likely related to each other. So we can use that fact. We can, for instance, we can concatenate adjacent messages and let them be found together. And that might be useful because when they will be extracted and given to an LLM will understand if they're related. And in most cases, we will have useful context. Another thing we can do is to use a lightweight LLM to enhance the context of individual messages. So when a new message arrives, we take it and we ask an LLM to add details to it, to expand it, to add keywords that will help it to be found with the related queries. That might be useful. So what else can be done here is we can include actual names of communicating users in the messages before creating embeddings for them. For instance, at the beginning of the string, we add the name of the person who sent the message and then they go the message. And we create embedding for this concatenated string. Later, when a search includes username, your embedding will be matched because it also has the username. And you need to include actual usernames, not the Slack IDs, because embeddings will not be able to convert your Slack IDs into usernames. So it's better to use usernames. And the last thing is to include date times. So if you include date times, it will help embeddings to have some sense of timeline, right? So if you specify date range in your query, it might help embeddings to determine related messages. If you may include today's date in your query, and embeddings will use today's date to match with the dates in your embeddings that you created before and added dates of the messages to them. That is useful. So these are very helpful techniques, and I hope they will make your context better. Okay, so we've discussed the context, and now we have a vector database with embeddings that are constantly converted from our Slack messages. And at this point, we need to start handling search queries from Slack or any other interface and produce a logical answer to these queries. So this schema on the right describes that. So we have a new service, querying service, which takes requests from Slack and uses these three other services to generate a response. So it goes to it takes the query. It may want to enhance the query before going to the embedding service. So we may ask an LLM to add keywords or expand our query, or we want to add the current date to the query. So there are ways to enhance the query as well. So once it's enhanced, we go to the embedding service and generate an embedding for this enhanced query. And so we have a search vector. And then we go to the vector database and we search for related vectors, search for close vectors. And then we get like top 20 or 30 vectors. And that's our data for the prompt. Now we are ready to generate a prompt. We can, prompt is a very important piece of the whole process. So we have our query, we have our data from the vector database, and we can start generating a huge prompt, which includes the query and the data in some way. And then we ask a smart LLM to use this prompt and to generate us an answer to our query. Why I emphasize that we have to use a smart LLM? Because at this point, in this point of the system, it's important to use as better LLM as possible, because it does the actual reasoning, it infers the answer, it uses a lot of data to come up with an answer to the user's question. So it's crucial that it will be as clever as possible. So prompt is a very important part of this process. It's hard to overstate the importance of the final prompt with the data from the embeddings. This instruction determines how your LLM infers an answer to the query, take into account the provided information. So that's what I've just said. This is the final prompt. It determines the quality of the whole system. So what are the hints to make this prompt better? First, we can include the current date, today's date, and the user's profile. It will help LLM to know today's date and some information about the user who is querying. It might help it to in the process of inferring an answer. We can also describe the chain of reasoning that the LLM has to follow. Like, first, try to convert all these messages in some form of knowledge. Then, based on this form of knowledge, generate this part of an answer, or explain a few sentences what you think about the query, and then use this explanation and the data from the messages to generate a more comprehensive answer. And then from this comprehensive answer, you can generate a short answer that can display to the user. So you can form different chains of reasoning. The third bullet is that you should use structured data for input and output. So when you provide your messages with the context to an LLM, you need a way to reference them. Like, you may want to include IDs of the messages along with some other data, because in your output, you probably want to have IDs to the messages that were used to infer the answer, because you may want to return to the user and show the messages that were related. That's very important. So you want to include not just the content of the messages or the content of the context. You want to include some objects that represent the embeddings with IDs, so that these IDs can be later used to reference the actual messages. Okay. And so for the output, it's probably a good idea to force the model to produce you JSON with some additional field. As I just mentioned, you may want to include IDs to the messages to build links to the messages and return to the user. So having a structured output with JSON is very, very handful here. So then LLM examples. It's always a good idea to instruct LLM by examples. Give it examples of what you expect in return. Give it examples of the object that it should return, and then it will do its job better. The reasoning instructions is almost the same as chain of reasoning. So just tell it how to reason step by step. And experiments. It's always crucial and important to play as much as possible with your prompt before launching it in production, because it's like the most important piece of the system, and you want to invest a lot in its testing. You don't want to test in production, you want to test it, and it's cheap to test because you can generate tons of examples of messages, of queries, and do it locally. Do it in a test environment without launching anything. So it's highly recommended to do as much testing as possible at this stage. So all these improvements will help you to build better prompts. Thank you, and I hope this talk was useful for you. Here is the link to our Slack bot, which uses all the described techniques and approaches. So if you like this talk, please leave a comment and reach out to us. And I hope to give another talk in 3 months from now. Thank you so much. Bye.
All right. Thanks, Sierra, for that talk. With embeddings in Slack, you can do a lot. So let's move on to our next talk, our closing talk. Sophie, she's going to talk about our favorite thing, emojis.
All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm Sophie, and today I'm excited to talk to you about a topic that's both fun and surprisingly powerful in the world of communication, emojis in Slack. As I said, my name is Sophie. By day, I am the product manager at Sleek Consulting, and I'm also the Slack community leader for the remote chapter. I'm excited to be a guest speaker here today with you all in Santa Barbara. If you'd like to connect with me on LinkedIn, please do so. That is the QR code for my LinkedIn profile. And these are all my pets up here. I would like for you all to pay special attention to Houdini here because you will be seeing him a little bit later. So let's get into it. First of all, the first purpose for emojis in Slack is just an efficient response. I'm sure that all of you are probably familiar with this one. You know, sometimes less really is more. If you're anything like me, your Slack notifications are going off all day, every day, on top of all your other notifications from things like email, task management, and whatever other tools you might have running on your computer. The last thing you need is more notifications, right? And that's why sometimes it can not only save the writer of a message time, but also the recipient time if the person can just simply react to a message instead of typing out a reply. In this case here, I had a request that somebody add me to a task, and I was able to see that she had done that when she reacted with a thumbs up. She didn't spend time typing a message, and I didn't receive an unnecessary notification that just said, yeah, I did this. I got the same thing out of that thumbs up message, and I was able to move on with my day. Similarly, we have a system here where when we need to refresh our sandbox environment for our development, we use kind of a traffic light system. So if people are okay for the refresh, they respond with a green circle. But if you're not okay, you can reply or use a red or a yellow circle as well. So that way, Amanda's not getting bombarded with replies about, yes, I'm good, messages that don't really tell her anything. And she can continue on with her day and stay on top of what's really important. Here's another use case down at the bottom here. We've got a poll made just using emojis. So I was asking my team what they want for lunch on Monday, and people just replied with the emoji of the thing that they are interested in eating. So these are great ways to use emojis. I'm sure you're all also familiar just with the fact that in this day and age of digital communication, sometimes it can be really difficult to tell exactly what people mean by certain things. Some people are not the most effective written communicators, and emojis really helps to express a tone that can sometimes be difficult to get across using only written communication. All right, so continuing on here, we're going to get a little more sophisticated and talk about emoji triggered workflows. I love these. Workflows in Slack are a whole other topic. I'm not going to talk about those in depth, but I'm going to talk about a special type of workflow, which is going to be workflows that are triggered when someone reacts with a specific emoji that allows you to start one of these workflow processes in just a matter of seconds. So, for example, you can use these to create a new task in your task management software. You could start or schedule a meeting if somebody sends a question that can't be answered with a simple message. Or you can do what we do here at Sleek, and everyone has an emoji of their face. And if you reply or with a face emoji, it actually shares that message with the person whose face you responded with. So we'll see an example here. On the left here, I've got some examples of the workflows that I have in my org that are triggered by emojis. So that first one, the summon Sophie one, is triggered when somebody reacts with my face. And it usually means that they want me to take a look at something. So when somebody replies with my face, I get a DM that says, hey, such and such replied to this message with your emoji, and why don't you go take a look? I've also have one that if somebody reacts with a Zoom emoji, it starts a meeting between the person who did the reaction and the person who sent the original message being reacted to. And then I even have one in our specific, we have a channel for product development ideas because these emoji workflows are actually channel specific. So you choose which channels they function in. So I've got one in our product development idea channel where if somebody replies with the Asana logo, it actually creates a new idea in Asana for review by our product team, which is me. So how you would do these is just when you go to create a new workflow, it's one of the options listed. It's the second one. When an emoji reaction is used, it asks you to select which emoji. It can be one of the ones that's already in Slack, or it can be a custom one. Just a side note, you actually have to add, if it's going to be a custom emoji, you have to add it to Slack before you go build your workflow. You can't add an emoji while you're building the workflow, kind of a little quirky thing that I noticed, but I'll talk about how to add custom emojis in just a few moments on the next slide. All right. The third topic for today is going to be adding your own custom emojis, and that's going to allow you to have a lot of fun with this and make your Slack workspace your own. When it comes to adding your own custom emojis, there's actually several different places that you can get them from. All of this craziness happening on the screen right now are actually some of the custom emojis that we have in our sleek Slack workspace. It's actually a really interesting kind of capture of the culture at Sleek and people's moods and various events that have happened recently. Looking back through them is kind of a little bit like a time capsule, and it's actually really fun for me to see them. And I remember who added them and why. So it really makes your Slack workspace more personal. Honestly, when I'm having a stressful day, I will do what I call emoji shopping, and I will spend time online, just 5 or so minutes, and I will collect some new emojis that are really speaking to me that day for whatever reason, and I'll add them to our workspace and then usually share them in our random channel and say that new emojis have been added, and people are actually usually really excited about this. So it kind of makes my day better and it makes everybody else's day better as well. Something else that you can do is you can actually, if you are artistic or you are looking for a new hobby, you can make emojis yourself. I have one in here. It's kind of a pixel art emoji that I created of my rabbit Houdini. So remember way in the beginning, I said keep an eye out for Houdini because you will be seeing him again. Well, there he is. He has his own custom emoji. He is famous in our Slack workspace. And the other way that you can make your own, if you don't want to completely make the art from scratch, you can use photos or logos and upload those as emojis. People get really excited when they see your custom company logo added as an emoji in your workspace. And I think it's a really great way to kind of build some team spirit and some excitement. And then the final way that I like to acquire emojis is I will borrow them from other workspaces. And I'll show you how to do that on the next slide here. Okay, so let's talk about how to actually add these emojis to your workspace. So the first route is the easiest one, and that's if you're in a Slack Connect or some conversation with somebody else from outside your organization and they have different emojis that maybe you want. When somebody uses an emoji that is not in your workspace, if you right click on it, it will bring up a window to add it right to your org, which is really simple. Slightly more complicated, if you're like me and you're in multiple workspaces, like not only am I in the Sleek Slack workspace, but I'm also in the Slack community leaders Slack workspace. And a lot of times I see cool emojis in there. It happens honestly almost every day. And how you can capture those is if you right click on the photo of the thing, right click on the actual icon itself, gives you the option to copy the image URL. And you can actually open that in your web browser, and it opens the emoji as its own web page. Then you can just download and save the picture. And then you're going to upload it in the same way that you would upload your own custom art, like my Houdini emoji or your company logos or any other JPEG, PNG, GIF file that you might find online. And the way that you upload these image files is actually if you are in a message compose window and you click the actual emoji button, you click the little happy face, in the bottom left-hand corner of that flyout window where you can choose from all of the emojis, you should have a button that says add emoji. If this button is missing, it's likely that you don't have permission to add custom emojis to your workspace. There is a special permission to do it. It's either on and off, depending on the type of user that you are in your workspace. And if you don't have the ability, you should send this presentation to your admin and convince them why you should have the ability to add custom emojis. Admins, you can delete them if people get out of control or add things that you don't want in your org. You can still moderate them. All right, so last but not least, let's talk a little bit about emoji etiquette. So I think this is pretty funny. I hope nobody is offended by any of these emojis that I've put here, but the reason that I put all of those there is actually because in certain areas of the world or in certain demographics, all of those emojis can actually be highly offensive. So you have to be really careful with how you use these and who you're using them with. I would say still use them with care. They can be fun, but just like any communication tool, it can cause damage if it's misused. Um, Honestly, the thumbs up one is my favorite because not only is thumbs up offensive in just some cultures in different areas of the world, but it also seems to be a little bit of an age thing because I've noticed that younger people, like my age or younger, actually will be offended if you reply to a message with just a thumbs up. We take that as, oh my gosh, they must be mad at me, they must be irritated. Whereas older people tend to think it's totally fine, and there's nothing wrong with replying with just a thumbs up. So, regardless, like I said, be careful with how you're using these. And like any good thing, moderation is key to emojis. So embrace them, but use them with care. An overload of emojis can make it almost impossible to understand what you're trying to say. Don't turn your messages into hieroglyphics. People do not want to have to be substituting in every other word for an emoji. Trying to read that is not fun. Um, Clear communication should always be our primary goal. Emojis should complement that goal and not overshadow it. In conclusion, embracing emojis in Slack isn't just about adding a smiley face here and there. It's a strategy for more efficient and effective communication. Use them wisely as quick responses, leverage them to trigger workflows, and have some fun with custom emojis. Thank you for your time today. I hope you leave here with a newfound appreciation for the power of emojis in making our communication not only more efficient, but also a lot more enjoyable. Thank you.
All right, that was awesome by Sophie for closing us out. She wasn't able to join us for our Q&A session, but I did have a question about the eggplant emoji. Sometimes I see that and I don't know if that's appropriate or not. I was wanting to get her feedback about it. All right, so let's bring on some of our speakers on stage. We have Fede and Yura. All right, and we have Alice wants to ask a question, so let's bring her on. Go ahead, Alice.
All right. Hi, Fede. So Raj told me to ask you a question.
Alice, do you know what a plant is?
You mean those things that sit around the house?
Never mind. Go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, so Fede, what is the difference between developing on Microsoft Teams versus on Slack?
We can't hear you, Fede. For some reason, your audio is not working.
You can hear me now.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, great. I haven't developed any Teams app in a while, like for a year. But at that time, it was like quite different. Teams uses like iframes, so you will need to like build a website, and then the iframe will be on Teams and show everything there. On Slack, you will like send views to the user, and I don't know. I feel like all Slack apps are more like consistent. They are all similar, so it's much easier to use different apps. And yeah, I think that's the main difference.
All right. Thanks for your question, Alice. No Slack swag for you. You ruined the plan. All right. Hopefully, I'm saying your name right, Vaishnavi. We're bringing you on stage so you can ask. Go for it. You gotta unmute if you do have a question. You're still muted.
Sorry, I have two windows open. I was just trying to.
All right. Do you have a question for our speakers? No. All right. So actually, I have a question for Yura. So Yura, for embeddings, so you mentioned like semantic search. What are some other use cases for having embeddings?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep, go for it.
One sec. I'll try to turn on my camera. Meanwhile, you can repeat your question.
Yeah, so the question is, you mentioned semantic search. What are some other things you can do with embeddings of your Slack messages?
So one thing you can do is to try to categorize your messages, try to outline different topics of communications that you have in Slack. As we discussed in the feature of ComFlow. So what else? So just embeddings alone don't give you a lot, right? You still need to do additional analyzing of that using an LLM, I guess, right? So you can just build a lot of embeddings and try to do something with them. They always work in pair with something else, right? So ROC and how we use it is probably the main usage of that.
So Vaishnavi's question is, what's your personal preference for a vector database?
I haven't worked a lot with Postgres, but I hope it will beat all other things because it's open source and like Postgres. Pinecone works pretty well, as we've tested it a lot, right? So my personal preference at this point is Pinecone, but I hope to switch over to Postgres soon.
Yeah, what's the reasoning to switch?
Yeah, first of all, we will be able to scale to any point, right? Because it will be cheaper. We will control it, and we will be able to host our data. This is the main point, right? Everything will be hosted in our services, in our infrastructure. And the second, we will be able to control how it's scaled, right? Because with Pinecone, you just rely on the existing mechanics that Pinecone provides you. You have these pods, you can have many pods, and that's only the point of scaling. With your own Postgres instance, you can like develop different strategies of scaling and take additional metrics, not only those that Pinecone provides you. So there is much more flexibility.
Gotcha. And Fede, question for you. What's your favorite Slack app that's one that you didn't develop yourself?
I guess Linear. Linear it has a really nice integration.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we use that a lot, and I think it's really useful.
What about the GitHub one?
Yeah, that's also a good one.
I like the Google Drive one's nice. Calendar.
Yeah, Calendar is really useful.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of great apps out there. Like for polling, Poly has always been one of my favorites. Tons of great apps on the app directory.
But Giphy is actually my favorite one. The one to send GIFs.
Giphy. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
How could I forget that? That one I use like all the time, just doing stupid GIFs all the time. So yeah. In terms of usage, Giphy is my most used app because I just can't
by
get
far.
enough GIFs. Yeah. So all right. So that's the end of our session. Vasnavi, stay online. We're gonna get you some swag for participating. And let's see here. She's saying now starting a debate on Slack versus Discord authentication. Have you got any of you guys done any development on Discord?
No.
Yeah, done any Discord. I don't know because Slack is very much like like Teams Enterprise. Discord. There are some companies that use Discord for the commercial enterprise, but I've seen it more for so open source projects, for communities and whatnot. So it's very similar, and you get the same sort of, you can do apps with / commands and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of similarities there. But we're slackers, right? We're big time slackers. So all right, with that, we're gonna wrap it up. Vaishnavi, stay online. I'm gonna reach out to you, and then we'll get you some cool Slack swag. I don't know if you'll get like this cool T-shirt that I got or this jacket, but we'll get you something. All right. Thanks everybody for joining.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks everyone. Bye.